Welcome back to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. My name is Reika and I am your host. I hope your day is going well as you're listening and tuning into this week's podcast. If you are a new listener, welcome. Thank you so much for tuning in and trying out something new. And if you are a returning listener, thank you for coming back. I really, really appreciate you. So the Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast was born almost 2 years ago because I wanted to interview other full-time yoga teachers across the world to see how they are making this career work. As a full-time yoga teacher for almost 10 years, I wanted to hear and learn and get inspired from other full-time yoga teachers' story and journey. So that's kind of how this podcast started. I hope you're enjoying listening in to all the amazing guests that I brought in on this podcast where they share their unique stories of being a full-time yoga teacher. So this week, we are kicking off a 3 mini-part series where I get to bring in everyone's favorite, Karen, back for a mini-series where we talk about sequencing. Sequencing is something that Karen and I really love and also love to chat about. And I really do feel like Karen and I are on the same page with what we believe good and intentional, intelligent sequence is like. So that's why I wanted to bring her on. And that is why I am bringing her on as a guest teacher on my upcoming workshop for Mentorship for Yoga Teachers program that I run. So once a month on my mentorship program, I have a special topic workshop, either taught by me or I bring in guest teachers. So this month for October, I am bringing in Karen to teach a workshop on intentional sequencing for Vinyasa that is anatomically informed. So she's coming in to teach and lead this workshop on October 25th, which is Saturday, 2 to 4 p.m. California time. It is in person in Long Beach. So if you're in Long Beach or near Long Beach, I really recommend you come in person, but we will be live streaming people in. So if you live in another time zone, another state, you are still welcome to come and join this workshop and join via Zoom. And it will be recorded if you want to watch the recording later for some reason you can't be there live. This workshop is open to any and all yoga teachers of all level. If you're looking to up-level your sequencing methodology, format, the way you think about sequencing, especially if you are a Vinyasa teacher and you want to be anatomically informed and sequence in a way that is intelligent and intentional. This workshop is sliding scale from $45 to $85. You get to decide any amount in between. I'll put the link to sign up for this workshop on the show notes, so please go check out the link to sign up for this workshop. I'm very excited to bring on Karen for the next 3 weeks for us to talk about sequencing. And we are kicking off this week talking about how to prepare the body for the sequencing. So that's the topic of first week. I hope you enjoy our conversation. And if you have any feedback, I always love hearing from all of you listeners. So don't be shy and message us, one of us. All the way to connect with one of us will be on the show notes as well. So let's get started on this week's podcast. Welcome, Karen, to Full-Time Yoga Teacher Podcast. I'm so excited that you're back for another mini-series that we get to geek out about yoga together, because we love talking about yoga. And this mini-series is all about sequencing in yoga. So welcome back, Karen. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to be having this conversation with you.
I consider sequencing, I would say, like, maybe in a very basic sense, I consider sequencing the why behind a yoga class. I would say in particular for me, the why behind an asana class, or why I am teaching these poses placed together in this specific way. Mm-hmm. And if we think about the definition of vinyasa, which is to place in a special or deliberate way, sequencing kind of follows that meaning of vinyasa for me. There's a reason behind why we're doing the things the way that we're doing them and in that order.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's like why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because you're very intentional with how you create your sequencing for your Vinyasa classes. And I try to be also very intentional But it took a while for me as a new teacher. Like it took a while for me to get to where I am now of making sure my sequence has reason, like why there's a reason why every single pose is in it and why it's in that order. I remember in the beginning, I just kind of like wanted to teach as many poses as possible, or I'll just put in poses that didn't really make sense together or didn't really have a theme. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I think it's so important to have an intentional way we create sequences. And that kind of brings me to question of, have you had an experience where the sequences or classes you've taken wasn't very intentional and it was not as a pleasant experience as it could have been?
Well, I think I'm sure you and I'm sure almost everyone listening to this has probably had an experience where they've been in a class and it might be like in the beginning, in the middle, of the end, where something almost feels like it gets thrown in and you can feel like, whoa, this just does not feel right or like it's working in my body. To me, a really good sequence, I feel like my teacher has just been able to guide me into it without me having to overthink it or trying to think about the right word. Yeah, overthink it or
Doesn't feel awkward. Sometimes there's some awkward, like the pose get thrown in, or maybe transition felt kind of awkward and not smooth, or sometimes it just like didn't really feel or make sense in the body.
yeah, it works. I think the word that I'm thinking about is intuitive. It
Mm.
just has this energetic feeling that it just works together. It doesn't feel forced. And you and I had an experience. It's story time. You and I had an experience where we took a class and the first pose was plow pose
Mhm.
into shoulder stand. So like full spinal flexion up into an inversion with no prep. And it's so funny because I don't even think I needed to look at you, but you and I were next to each other and we immediately were thinking, oh my gosh, what is happening? And, I think for us as teachers, it's kind of easier to get this sense, but I really feel students can also feel it as well
Mhm.
when you are accurately preparing them for something.
Yes, it's so true. I remember that class. I'll never forget about that class. I just couldn't believe it that teacher started off in plow pose and went into shoulder stand. That was like a first.
Never in my life.
Yeah, and yeah, I would always remember that. And for me, I feel like when you said like we feeling prepared or preparing the body to move in certain direction. For me, with more tighter body and coming from more like athletic background, it really takes a while for my muscles to warm up and feel like ready to start folding or moving into a back bend, or like it just takes longer for my body to feel warm enough to move into a bigger range of motion. So that's a huge one for me. Like I just feel like preparing my body from the beginning so that I feel ready to, and I don't feel rushed into a certain shape and poses that my body needs some time to get ready for.
Yeah. And we were talking about this earlier, but there's this word vinyasa, krama, right? So vinyasa to place in a special or deliberate way, and krama meaning in steps or stages. So we're taking steps, we're going up steps to get to the top, to the peak, and then we're taking steps to bring ourselves all the way back down, not only in our physical body, but also in our nervous systems. Right. And I think too, it's important to clarify that at least you and I are talking more about like a vinyasa flow class,
Okay.
typically with Sun A in chaturanga and those kinds of things. And, even for me, I need to warm up before I do a Sun A. I personally, maybe in my 20s, I personally can't just go. I think I said one time in my class, I was like, I can't just raw dog a chaturanga anymore. Like, it's not going to happen. I need to warm up my shoulders. I need to warm up my spine. I need to be prepared.
Yes, it's so true. And, I used to practice Ashtanga Vinyasa, like 6 days a week practice. And I just always remember feeling in my body, because I know it's different. Some people practice Ashtanga for their whole life and their body is fine. But in my body, going straight into Sun Salutation A me at the very, very beginning of the class felt too soon, too rushed. And even where certain poses were placed in primary series, for me, my body, like I didn't feel like my body was well prepared to get to, especially Urdhva Dhanurasana, the upside down wheel pose that happens towards the end of the primary series. I just felt like my shoulder was not warmed up at all to even get close to what my potential of getting into that pose was. So I think, yeah, preparing and having intention of like slowly warming up the body is so important.
Yeah. And for me, if I'm going to sequence towards a particular peak pose, which I often have a peak pose in my sequence, but I'm not always sequencing towards that peak pose, if that makes sense. Generally, I'll focus on some type of action. So maybe an action at the joint. So if you're talking about Urdhva Dhanurasana or upward bow, there's a couple things to consider. And I think this is what's so interesting, right? It's like I could focus on the hips and the hamstrings in Urdhva Dhanurasana, but then I could also focus on shoulder flexion in Urdhva Dhanurasana. And I it's so interesting for me because I can start from the beginning of class offering I'll regress a bigger pose, offering just having people explore this feeling of what it means to, move their shoulders into flexion and then invite that into all the other poses in class, as opposed to just maybe doing a bunch of hip openers and doing nothing with the shoulders. And then at the end of class being like, surprise, upward facing bow.
I like what you said of like you usually have a peak pose, but it doesn't have to be a peak pose. Like you said, maybe what you're trying to teach that day is not really how beautifully can you get into Urdhva Dhanurasana, but you're teaching the movement of shoulder flexion, and it can look in so many different ways, and you're teaching that action. The action is kind of like the theme that you're weaving in throughout the class and slowly building up on it. Yeah, because I actually learned from Yoga Works, I think we learned peak pose sequencing. And later in my teaching, I started to learn more how Annie teaches, where she calls it peaking. There's no one peak pose, but there's like multiple peaks that happens, and they all kind of share the similar movement actions or principles that is the focus of that class. So it's not necessarily we have to have like hyper fixation on one pose, but you can bring multiple poses that share the same actions and make that into like a theme or the topic of the class.
Yeah. And I think too, for me, even though it was hard at first and I was a newer teacher, now I think it actually really helps me get super deliberate on what it is I'm teaching, because we're teaching, right? We're teachers. So what is it that I'm teaching my students, or what is it that I would like them to understand? And sequencing is the way that I can communicate that to them
Yeah.
or get it across to them. So I might still have that moment at the end of class for playtime where people want to play with doing their bigger back bend. But I think at the end of the day, if we're bringing awareness to that area, that's really what I love, whether or not people are achieving this specific pose.
Yeah, yeah, so true. And I like what you said, like we are teaching something, we're a teacher. Slightly off topic, but I was listening to Leslie Kaminoff, the teacher that went to take his continuing education training before. He said something that was interesting. He's like 200-hour certified teacher, yoga teacher should be called yoga instructor, and then 300-hour certified teacher is a yoga teacher. And then he said then the next level is yoga educators. And those are the one who actually teach teachers.
Teach teachers.
Yeah, which I thought was kind of cool way to categorize. But that's off topic. But I was thinking when you say we're teachers, I think that's like such a key. It's like, what are we teaching today? Like, what is your goal that you want to bring forth, or what is the action you want to share with your students today? Because I was like this as a new teacher, and I get these questions a lot from new teachers. It's like they just put poses together just to kind of get through the class that they're teaching, but there wasn't any intention of like, this is this topic or this movement action or movement principle is what I want to like drive home today. And that could be, next class, next week, you could have a whole different theme. But what is like one thing that you want students to take away from your sequence that day? I think that focus can be helpful.
Yeah. And I think too, what you were talking about earlier, I feel like if I teach a class and someone comes up to me after and asks me, why was this pose here at this point, or why did we do this pose? I'm probably just over prepared in a way, but I generally will always have a reason why, whether it's a counterbalance or whether it's something as simple as, you know, we're doing skandasana because I'm working on ankle dorsiflexion for something that's going to happen later. Even though there's many other things happening in that particular pose, focusing on one small thing and those relationships between all those poses for me is kind of what helps me sequence in a way that feels a little bit more intelligent. And I always say when I've taught sequencing workshops before is that probably the majority of your class will not recognize how much work or thought or intentionality you put into it, but they will walk out of your class feeling a certain way. And that's how you know, at least for me, how I did my job as a teacher.
Yeah. Oh, I love what you said. First of all, when you said when the students come up to you and ask like, why was this pose in the sequence? I want more students to ask me those questions. I feel like most
That's
don't think that far.
no, it's only like people in teacher training. It's usually only people in teacher training who are either like having to observe my class or they're in teacher
Yeah.
training and they want to know why. And I'm like, here you go.
I would love that kind of question. Like I could talk on and on about like, well, we did this because of this and this and this and this, which is exactly kind of what you said. Like not many people actually realizes how much thought process goes into how someone like me and you sequence. There's a reason why every single pose was in there. There was a reason why it was in that specific order most of the time.
Yes, yeah.
And I think there's so much intentionality in that. Hope, like you said, maybe the students may not realize all the geeky stuff that went into that, but they might have this feeling of like balance when they're walking out. They feel like or centered. And that's like not
Yeah,
only
and
physical, but nervous system too.
yeah, and I think about this too, like when I teach backbends, because I'm still talking about Urvadanyarasana, obviously, because I love backbends. But you come to lay down and then you work in, unless you're doing a drop back, but you lay down and then you do that pose. So I don't love to take people down and bring them back up. Like that's not my favorite. If you are even thinking about sequencing, because I think once you get down to the ground, it's kind of like that signal, okay, things are changing, we're shifting.
Wow.
But you have to get down to do Urdhva Dhanurasana. And I would think that after that, you would probably want to put in some type of forward fold as a counter. But often I'll have them do like a past hamstring stretch. And at that point, I will tell them, hey, I know that we're laying down and I don't love to bring us back up, but I would like us to do a seated forward fold now because it fits in energetically after a back bend as opposed to doing it beforehand.
Yeah.
So that's where sequencing is really interesting to me in that way, because it's not only physical, it's also how does one pose affect the pose before it and the pose after it.
Yes. Yes. Oh my God. So it's not because we've been talking a lot about how we prepare the body into leading up to the sequence. But another side of this coin of this topic is like, how do we bring them back down? Like, what's the cool down? And this is another one. It took a long time for me to like comprehend and understand. It's like cool down also needs just as much thoughtfulness and intentionality just as much as how you build up the sequence. Like we have to think about what did we do? And I feel like Annie talks about like we're building. And then the coming down the sequence is just like almost you're unwinding all the effort you made during that class slowly, intentionally. And so that like your nervous system can be in a state that you can really appreciate Shavasana at the end.
And I'm sure I'm not the only one who, at least for me, it's the hardest part, the cooling down, in particular in teaching an hour class. I mean, to me, an hour is not enough. Well, okay, so I teach a lot of heated classes, right? So I think in a way you can warm up a little bit faster, but sometimes the heat gives you this illusion of flexibility.
False sense of flexibility.
Yes, yeah. There's a lot of hamstring injuries in hot classes, but in the terms of a group class, we're teaching to a lot of people, and I'm not giving into anyone's expectations, but I do need to make sure that the vinyasa portion, if I'm teaching a level 2, is physically challenging enough, right? So sometimes I can get caught up in this, like I go a little too long at the end, and then there's not enough time to cool down. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who has done that. So sometimes, and I haven't been doing it as much lately. I've really been trying to be good about giving myself, and my students extra time at the end, you will have 10 minutes left. So you're just doing like a pose on each side in Shavasana, and it's not enough. And I can always tell when it's not enough. But again, if I'm going to do a lot of twists and back bends, I need a longer cool down, right? As opposed to hip openers, because I think energetically they have a different feeling. But I can always tell if I didn't do a good enough job sequencing the cool down, because I feel like I don't have to think so much about the cool down sequence as opposed to maybe like the meat of the class, because people will be moving around a lot in Shavasana. Like their nervous systems are not settled.
Yes, it's so true. Oh my God. I just feel this sense of like such like contentment and maybe like completeness when I'm sitting at Shavasana and like the whole room is like
Yes.
see that they're dropped in, like so dropped in. I'm like,
It's a feeling.
yeah. And then I definitely have also experienced many classes where everybody was so fidgety and I'm like, okay, I probably didn't do.
Same. I take responsibility for that.
And in that time cooling them down after this. Yeah, yeah. And maybe to talk a little bit about heat, because we both teach heated classes and I teach non-heated. Do you teach non-heated too, Vinyasa?
No.
But let's talk about how heat can happen.
No.
how heated classes can.
One tear falling from my eye. I teach no. One tear crying for me not teaching. I would love to teach a non-heated vinyasa. Hello, anyone? Sorry. What was your question again?
The question was, let's talk about heated classes, because heated classes, are very common these days. So, like, what are some things that we should think about in terms of preparing the body and also cooling down the body in terms of sequencing in heated classes? What are some things that we should consider because it's a heated class?
So, I mean, so many things. I think first you have to make sure the cool down is long enough. You have to make sure the cool down is long enough because people are getting so warm, especially if they're breathing Ujjayi pranayama the whole class. I mean, Leslie, talk about Leslie Kaminoff. I think, remember I asked him, didn't I ask him that question when we went?
Yeah.
I said, we're breathing a heating breath in a hot room. And he said, no, you shouldn't be breathing that way. But I do think a lot of people still teach Ujjayi pranayama in a heated class. And that's just heat, pitta, energy, like building, building, building. And then lay down and do a half pigeon for 3 minutes on each side. And then go into Shavasana. It's not enough. It's not enough. Yeah.
So you think longer, if possible, longer cool down, especially in a heated class?
Yeah. I mean, an hour 15 would just be ideal, but I know most of us are an hour, and then I'm at 50 minutes for some of my classes now. So
Yeah.
you just have to be smart
Yeah.
in the way that you're offering things, and also making sure that you're not trying to do too much in the hour. Because I think even with a longer cool down, you just still might not get there. And by longer cool down, I mean 10 minutes, maybe 15 if I'm lucky.
Yeah. I can already hear the questions of the listeners. It's like, how many minutes of Shavasana should we give students if the class is 60 minutes long or 50-minute long class?
I do 5 minutes. That's like, I mean, I'm happy if I do 5 minutes. 5 minutes is my ideal. Sometimes it's 4 in a 60-minute class. And then in 50 minutes, 3.5. Yeah.
Me too. I don't teach 50 minutes anymore, but when I teach 60 minutes, I try to give them 5. But sometimes it can, 4 minutes can happen, but try to do 5. During the teacher training, I got to teach 2-hour classes, and I would give them like 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Yes, 15 minutes. Oh my gosh.
That was nice. But yeah, that's hard to do these days, especially in group, like a public group classes. So I think 5 minutes is a good suggestion. And then depending on your teaching style or who you are, like add more or maybe take out a minute or so. But hopefully more than 2 or 3 minutes in 60-minute class.
And if you are going to do a 3-minute Shavasana, just make sure there's some time of a cool down before that, right?
Yes.
It's not just do a bunch of poses, move around a lot, and then lay down, because that's going to have even less of a land, I think, in people's bodies and then in their nervous systems, if you haven't even spent time to, like you were saying, unravel things before you get them to be there.
Ooh, I like that unravel. I like that word better than unwinding. Unravel. Okay, so anything else you want to add in terms of this topic of sequencing? Warm up, cool down.
I don't know. Just if you're going to teach it, feel it in your own body. And then also recognize that, at least for me, like if it doesn't feel right in even hard because everyone has a different body. But in particular for me, if I try something and I feel like I'm a little bit more flexible, if I try something and it's a little, I better know I need 10 times more warm up for my students. Just make sure that you at least feel it in your own body or have done it in your own body or have an understanding of it energetically before you're going to put it somewhere in class or put those things together.
Yeah.
I think, I talked about this earlier, but I'm sure I'm also not the only one who's had this experience where I've been in a class and my thought is, I really don't think this teacher did this or tried this. And they just kind of made it up.
Yeah, totally. Like, oh, that transition didn't work very well.
Yeah. Yeah. And listen, I'm not over there like this person's a horrible yoga teacher, right? Because I
Yeah.
have had those moments too
Oh,
in class
same.
where I'm immediately like, no, we're going to have to redo this next time.
Yeah.
But my thought is to try to avoid that as much as I can and also recognize that I'm a human being and I'm not perfect. But I think as teachers, we owe it to our students to put thought into what and how and why we're offering them these things.
Yes.
That to me is my duty as a teacher.
Yes, I completely agree with you. And I think that is kind of what's missing from a lot of like teachers who ask me questions or in my mentorship. I think maybe in 200 hours, they didn't really learn like how to create this kind of sequence that has intentionality in this thought process that went into why and how you put those poses together in this way. So that is why Karen's coming to teach a sequencing workshop for my mentorship program in October 25th. And it's open to other yoga teachers who's not part of the mentorship program if they want to come and join. It's in person in Long Beach, but it's also will be live streamed for people who live in other time zones or different countries. So I know we talked about so many things about sequencing today, but we didn't really get into like nitty gritty of like how and why. This is like a roadmap so you can start to think about creating sequence in this intentional way. So that is what we're going to be discussing in this workshop that Karen's going to be coming and teaching. So I hope you can join us in that workshop. Anything else you want to say before we close out this conversation?
No, I feel good. I think, I hope what I can offer in the workshop is just to get people's brains kind of functioning in that way, which can be hard. I talked to a lot of people who did a training at a specific studio and they were only taught to sequence this one specific way.
Yes.
So I recognize how difficult it can be to repattern the way you teach or think about things. So I hope that I give people the tools to be able to start feeling more empowered doing that themselves as teachers. Because it's difficult. It's hard work, but it pays off.
Yeah. And I think it's an art. It's like it's an art to create this beautiful like thought through sequencing, and it takes practice and learning from somebody who's been doing this for a long time and who does it so beautifully. I think will be such a great opportunity for any yoga teachers.
I'm very excited.
Well, thank you, Karen, for coming on this week to talk about this mini series on sequencing, and then next week we'll be back with some more topic on sequencing. So we'll talk.
Thank you, Reika.
Thank you so much for listening to Karen and I have conversation about sequencing and how to prepare the body. As you hope you can tell that we love talking about this topic, and sequencing is something that is really dear to our hearts, and we love talking about it. So I hope you enjoyed listening to us chat about it. So if you're interested in joining this upcoming workshop that Karen's going to be teaching for my mentorship program for yoga teacher, this workshop is called Intentional Sequencing. It's happening in October 25th, Saturday, 2 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. And the link to sign up for this workshop will be on the show notes. And it is sliding scale, anywhere from $45 to $85. You get to choose your own amount. It is live in person for anybody who lives in the area, and it is live streamed online if you want to join via Zoom, and it also will be recorded. So go check out the link on the show notes so you can join us on this amazing workshop that Karen's going to be teaching. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, please like, review, subscribe, anything you want to do, anything you can do on whatever platform you're listening to this podcast from. But most importantly, what matters the most is if you could share this podcast with somebody you know, some yoga teachers that you think will benefit from listening to this podcast, that would mean a lot to me. You can always reach out to me on Instagram at Reika Yoga, ReikaYoga. Message me through my website, www.reikayoga.com. So I hope you can come back and tune in on part 2 of this mini series that Karen and I recorded. I will speak to you next week. Bye.